Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I wanted to talk a little bit about JASMY because we just broke out of a pretty important structure that could see us very quickly and very easily retesting some local tops that we saw in June, and then after that obviously starting to take a run back at some of the highs we saw in 2021 and 2022. So pretty exciting news. So let's go on ahead and dive right in. So starting out, we can see here on the crypto bubbles, we have a couple reds, but overall, I mean, this is very much a green day. Obviously we got JASMY here at 4.9%. ICP's been going nuts today. They're up 15%. Fetch is another one that's done really well at 12%. Helium is one that's done pretty well lately, only up a little bit today at 2.5%. And then, obviously we've got Solana, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all doing relatively well. But keep in mind, if we look at the month, while it has technically flipped to green, largely in part due to some massive gains on Fetch, Helium, Phantom, Aave, HTX, some of these, it is still pretty mixed overall. We can see here Solana down 9.5% on the month still, Ethereum 9.3%, Bitcoin just shy of 5%. So definitely still mixed. I do think that this is probably a pretty good indicator of where we sit in the market so far. Obviously, some are doing relatively well, others are struggling, and we need to wait for the market to resolve itself to break out of some of these larger structures before we see any of this like up only everything's green all the time. So anyway, that's what we're looking at crypto bubbles. As I kind of alluded to on the channel yesterday, we have moved up into upper fear. We haven't quite moved into neutral yet. Obviously this is due to some of the the recent bumps up in price that we've seen. We have started to recover some of these recent drop-offs that we were suffering for over the past couple weeks. I mean, really everything over the past month or so has been pretty rough. Obviously we had a pretty decent run back up here, but then only for it to fall quickly down. So we are sitting up at 33, which is the upper edge of fear, not quite into neutral yet, but we have moved off of getting very close to that extreme fear territory, which is good. So looking at JASMY, I wanted to just kind of take a look at the JASMY chart today. And so, as I mentioned before, I have started doing most of my charting within Margex just because I have been trading in here lately. I haven't taken many trades too closely just because I do know that we are still in a bit of a market uncertainty. And while we have seen a pretty nice move up, on the green side, if we zoom in here, we can see, this is kind of what everything has looked like roughly. We've seen a pretty nice leg up, but it's just hard to say. Obviously it looked like it may have started to slow down here, but then it continued to break, and obviously we've hit this next line of support. We've come back a little bit, and now it's hard to say, are we going to make another run up at it? Is this going to be kind of where it stops out and starts to pull back? I don't know. So in times of uncertainty like this, especially when you're trading leverage, don't do anything too crazy. As I mentioned on the channel a couple days ago, I took a super tiny trade when we were running into this resistance. Obviously we broke well through that and have continued on up, which is why I keep tight stop losses, because while anything can happen, you need to be prepared for that eventuality, right? And so if you are interested in trading, please do check out the link I have below. Margex is offering up to $10,000 in referral bonuses, as well as they still are doing that $500,000 Caspa airdrop, which is still ongoing. So if you're interested and want to get in on that, just sign up using the link below and get started trading. There's no KYC, there's no VPN, nothing like that needed, so you can just sign up and get started trading. So anyway, back to looking at the chart. As we can see, we had this structure that was forming for a couple weeks. At this point, it was kind of a trend line down, and then more recently, kind of for about the past week or so, at the beginning of September, we were starting to see some price consolidate. Then obviously, we saw a breakout, we saw a retest, and then obviously it's been pretty much only up from there. We are starting, this is probably the first point of like major resistance, I would say, that we're hitting. Obviously we saw a wick up into it and through it, but then we've almost immediately come back down. It does look like we're maybe starting to consolidate in this area. Ultimately, what I'm looking for is if price starts to, kind of stutter out a little bit and we return up to this line, maybe I'll take a short to look for a return back, or potentially if we fall back to what could be a potential level of support here, maybe I'll take a long, hoping to run up to this. If we hit this, maybe I'll cut some and then obviously look for the continuation on up. Again, we never know what's going to happen, so I try, as I've mentioned before in previous videos, just look for the point of maximum potential gain. Obviously we're sitting kind of in the middle of what I would say are my two kind of points I'm looking at. So right now taking a trade would be pretty bad, right? Because I'm going to be down kind of a lot, regardless of where price goes, depending on which trade I take. And so obviously looking for kind of either settling on the support or bumping up against the resistance. That's probably the most ideal place if you are going to be trading to take a trade. Again, this is very short term. Now, if we go out and look long term, we can see, obviously, as I mentioned early on in the video, we've broken out of this structure. We have started to bump into this resistance, which, as we can see historically, has been a pretty substantial point of both support here and then as well as resistance here, and here. Now, if we are to break out of this, what I would say is probably the next most possible outcome would be we start to settle up around this 2.4 to 2.5, 2.4 to 2.5 cent range. We are seeing, obviously resistance here, support here, resistance here on the upside of this, support here. So, there's obviously a lot of liquidity and movement in this area. We can see if I had to pick one particular line, this probably is the line of best fit. Obviously, these don't quite run up into it, but there's a lot of resistance here when we saw this fairly large wedge forming, and then a lot of support here earlier on. So, and also a level of support here as well. So this is probably the next point to look at. After that, we're probably seeing this range in like the 3.3 cent range, and then after that, 4.4 cents. But obviously, these are all relatively close together in terms of price action. So if we see, this break, then, potentially if we run up rather quickly as we did in this type of structure, we might be able to see, kind of a bounce off, retest, and then break through again, same type of thing. And this could go pretty quickly to the upside, because we are talking about, here from, where we are currently to here is a 2x. So it's definitely very possible to kind of hit this with momentum. So that's one thing that I wanted to kind of keep an eye out. There's a couple others I want to talk about. We'll probably go into ICP probably tomorrow, just because recently we've seen a bit of ridiculous movement on price action. And this ICP is one that provides a great example of how you can really crush through these zones of resistance if you start to get some good momentum. So if you're interested in checking that out, check for my watch for my video coming out tomorrow. I'll probably do one on ICP at that point, but we can see how you can really crush through these resistances if you get a little bit of momentum. So anyway, moving on, there's not a whole lot of news coming out today as far as specific JASMY related, but obviously, as JASMY is based in Japan and they have a very strong following, and I imagine, just given kind of their position, they could kind of set the tone for crypto in Japan. I did see a couple recent news updates coming out of Japan, which are both pretty interesting. They're both Bitcoin related, but it just does go to show that the appetite is definitely there in Japan to see some like wide scale crypto adoption, which is obviously very, very bullish for JASMY, because I do think JASMY would probably see most of its initial like market adoption within Japan and then kind of start to move out more international. So what we can see is Japan's largest power company is actually mining Bitcoin using renewable energy now, which obviously is really good news, because this just continues to be more international adoption for Bitcoin, which is never a bad thing. And then as we can see here, we also can see Metaplanet just bought another 300 million yen worth of Bitcoin, which it's not a ton, but it's still it's still public companies accumulating Bitcoin on their balance sheet, which as we start to see, we have to remember that the market is competition. If we start to see some of these publicly traded companies getting in and holding Bitcoin on their treasury or on their balance sheet as part of like their treasury strategy, and they start to outperform all the ones that aren't, everybody else is going to start doing it, right? Because their valuations and their stock prices will obviously continue to climb because their treasury continues to get more value, either get more valuable or maybe even just hold value compared to what the rest of fiat is doing, right? So that's something that's a really interesting development as well, is we're starting to see a lot more large scale adoption of crypto within Japan. And as we're starting to see, maybe a little bit here in the US as well, as people usually look to these institutions for guidance in a certain sense. And so if we can see that a lot of these institutions are starting to get involved, I do think this will very much help retail demand and also just other institutional demand as well. So particularly for JASMY, when they have these number ID cards coming out in association with Apple in the spring, getting a lot more coverage and awareness and just general goodwill toward crypto within Japan specifically, I think is going to be a really, really important development. So, and as we can see on the chart, you know, obviously JASMY is starting to see some strong momentum. So we just have to see how long, you know, that momentum is going to continue, and hopefully it parlays into as retail starts to get more involved, because that's when we could start to see some of these pretty crazy price predictions that we've been over before in the channel. So anyway, hopefully you found the information in this video useful. If you did, please do drop me a like and a subscribe. I am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of September. I do think it's possible, and you know, I've been pretty excited with how the growth of the channel has gone so far. And so if you want to help me out with achieving that goal, I would really appreciate it. Also, if you do want to interact with me, or you know, have any comments, questions, feedbacks, whatever, anything that you want to just let me know, please do drop them in the comment section below. I do read and respond to all of my comments. So if you do want to interact with me, please do just leave a comment. That would be a great way to do so. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.